When Erik Karlsson was getting point-per-game seasons in the mid-2010s, people believed that he was one of the best offensive defenders the game had ever seen. Pretty good claim, you know? A guy who was a Norris-caliber player, who was playing in the Ottawa Senators, doing his thing, but a player who eventually did get sidelined a few times throughout his career. Now we're in a position where Erik Karlsson, with his huge $11.5 million AAV contract until 2027, is coming off of the biggest break he has ever taken in his NHL career. If one is looking for a bounce-back year, quote-unquote, from Erik Karlsson to get back to point-per-game form, to number one defender in the league form, this is the year to do it in 2020-2021 with the San Jose Sharks. But what exactly is going on if it doesn't happen like that? Let's go over onto Jack Hahn's Twitter account, because what he did was he wrote himself an article talking about Erik Karlsson, and this was a very good piece. I will say this right here. Do yourself a favor and check out Jack Hahn's full-on Back to the Future article on Erik Karlsson. Hahn is a former Marlies AHL assistant coach and a Leafs NHL hockey operations assistant, so he kind of knows his stuff. What he does in this article is he goes over 3 periods of Erik Karlsson's career, and he dissects what exactly made him so good back then, and how these things have changed as his game has evolved in 2020. The concerns in this article bring up the idea of whether or not it's actually time to be concerned on Erik Karlsson, and the fact is, he's just starting out on that huge 11.5 AAV contract. So, what happens with Karlsson over the next calendar year could be hugely indicative of what is going to come long term. Going over what exactly it is that Hahn writes in his article talking about Erik Karlsson, he talks about how he's a very good player. How, based off of statistical models and all the analytics, it appears that Erik Karlsson is exactly what people believe him to be, an elite, offensively contributive, puck-distributing defender. But Hahn writes about the concerns that he has, because beyond the numbers, he is extremely worried about Karlsson's game. And the verdict can pretty much be summarized in the one sentence over here. He is no longer a very good skater. This is where the clips come in, and as I said, I'll leave a link in the description to read this article yourself. Take a look at the clips, take a look at the notes as to what Hahn has written about these clips, and just go over what exactly it is Karlsson excelled at back in the day. In 2012, Karlsson was a generational offensive defender, but his inability to create leverage inside body contact and his poor defensive movement patterns meant that he by no means was the perfect player even at the height of his powers. The video clips back this up, and the analysis of the clips go over them in bigger detail. The next period that Hahn goes over is 2016. This is a few years removed from when Matt Cook's skate ended up severing Karlsson's Achilles tendon. Yeah, that was really not great. He missed a lot of the season after that. But the 2016 notes go over how exactly Karlsson's overall ability in separation with his movement is declining. He's gotten points, and that's great, but his play in his own zone, his ability to get walked a little bit, per se, is getting a little bit more prevalent as the years go on. Eventually, in 2020, this is what Hahn writes about Karlsson then. In the first period against the Winnipeg Jets, this is the video clip that is supplied in the article, Karlsson creates 0 chances for and was directly responsible for 7 against. It all starts with his inability to 1, get going, and 2, make his first puck touch inside movement. Now obviously it's just one game being showcased over here, so it's not the be-all and end-all, but it is indeed a smaller part of a bigger picture that you could definitely say paints the way that Erik Karlsson plays the game today. There's a comparison made with Mac Hollowell, a Toronto Maple Leafs prospect at the moment, and there are some comparisons made with pivots, open pivots, defensive patterning, and shifting your overall weight. And these are the kinds of things that Hahn says Karlsson needs to incorporate into his game going into the long term if he wants to remain effective at the same level he has been at before. Now, after I read this, I was very intrigued about the overall Erik Karlsson situation. I was like, okay, there are some amazing points brought up here. Sure, the guy can get points. He got 40 points in 56 games last year as a defender on the Sharks for all teams, which is not bad at all. But there is that underlying concern as to whether or not Karlsson going into the long-term future with the defensive skating deficiencies he's had over his career, combined with the injuries he has sustained, Is there a long-term projectability package of success here? Which is why when I saw this earlier on the Sharks subreddit, how are Sharks fans feeling about Erik Karlsson's ability to live up to his contract, I was like, yeah, this is a video topic. And the commenters over on Reddit bring up a few good points. Hey, this has been the longest break Erik Karlsson has ever had while healthy, pretty much for his whole career. He played for the Sharks last season. That team stopped playing in March. They didn't have any return-to-play games because they didn't make the return-to-play format. So they've had a long time just sitting around. And for Erik Karlsson, who has had his fair share of injury troubles over the past few years, you could say that's very valuable. It'll be very valuable in allowing his overall body to cope up. We all know the offensive skill is there, the mind, the puck skills, they're all present in Erik Karlsson. It's just the long-term projectability of his skating, his overall defensive coverage ability, and other defensive aspects like pivoting and cutting down defensive space. If there's gonna be any aspect of his game that forces him out of the league sooner rather than later, it's gonna be his ability to get walked. It's going to be his overall ability to not play to the standard of a Norris caliber player in his own zone. It's going to be his ability to keep up with the play the other way. And long term, especially going until 2027, my gosh, that certainly could be a question mark. Which is why this video poses that entire question. Is it time to start worrying about Erik Karlsson? And I guess if I had to answer that myself, I would probably say that now, today is not the time yet. But today is the time where I start thinking about it, because the article that Han posted highlights some very, very present issues and questions that need to be addressed sooner rather than later, because we can't have Erik Karlsson on this decline. We know he is inevitably going to be in a decline because the guy's already 30 and he's signed until he's 37, but how fast that decline is going to come is another question. The decline that was measured in the article from 2013 up until 2020 was significant enough. That was 7 years, and there was already a very big identifiable gap in skill from back then to now. So if you add 7 years more, how do things start looking then? Will Erik Karlsson ever get to a point where you look at the body of work he has, his offensive production, which is great, his defensive stability, which is questionable, and you say, yeah, that guy's worth $11.5 million a year. That guy deserves to be paid as the highest paid defender in the league in terms of AAV. We know the second guy on that list, Drew Doughty at $11 million a season, already has his question marks, but is the number one defender in terms of overall AAV in the same boat. Now, I don't want to say same boat as in they're the same, because Drew Doughty obviously has his own other realm of issues that Erik Karlsson does not have. They're different situations, but they're similar in practice. Because the next defenders after Karlsson and Doughty, you have yourselves another guy all the way back down there on the list. It's Roman Josi, who's making just over $9 million. And then after Roman Josi, you have PK Subban, who, oh my gosh, yeah, that's a different boat entirely too. So when it comes to Roman Josi, a guy who was locked up for quite a while at that $9-something million cap hit, Roman Josi is only 30 years old too. But he's a guy who a lot of people believe that contract will hold up. Is Erik Karlsson going to get to a point where, let's say 5 years down the line, you're saying, yeah, that guy deserves to be paid $2.5 million more than Roman Josi? And it's questions like these, I think, that really start opening myself up to the idea that Erik Karlsson just might not be as valuable as that contract might suggest. Everybody kind of knew that it was a huge contract back when he signed it, but will we see this contract become an overpayment sooner rather than later? Time will tell, but I think that time is going to be a year from now. If in 2021's offseason we take a look at Erik Karlsson and say, yeah, this guy continued producing points like crazy, this guy had a higher points per game than his 2019-20 with the Sharks, and he was able to use the rest to allow his body to catch up when it comes to defensive back-checking situations, breaking up plays, shutting down space, and being versatile enough to pivot back and forth in the defensive zone. If he is able to use this time off to really hone down those aspects, I think it's easy to say that it prolongs the value of that $11.5 million contract, and it keeps that contract at an acceptable number more than if he had not improved those things. So read the article that goes over Erik Karlsson in the description. Jack Hahn does an amazing job. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below what you think about Karlsson and the status of him as a hockey player. So that's Trollus 99, and Bye.